Doing. It is 7:07 on May 20th. This is a meeting of the Lake Elmo City Council, and I would ask that we do the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And next item is the approval of the agenda, and I'm just going to do a friendly amendment right now that before council reports, we have a discussion on the Parks Commission interviews.
Second.
Any other additions or changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as now discussed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Next up is approval of minutes. So we have minutes from May 6th, 2025. Does anyone have any things they'd like to see changed, or are we good to go?
Motion to approve the minutes for May 6th, 2025.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Public comments and inquiries, I'm guessing not. But we have something even better. We have a fantastic, highly awaited presentation from Mr. Kevin Magnuson, who is our Washington County Attorney. So thank you, number one, for coming here to speak with us. And for those who are watching, Mr. Magnuson is our county attorney here in Washington County. And it is a great relationship that we do have with the county attorney's office. And look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thank you very much, council members. As I said, my name is Kevin Magnuson. I am the county attorney in Washington County, and we do have a good relationship. As a matter of fact, I grew up in Lake Elmo. And for those of you who know anything about Lake Elmo history, there was Dr. Stevens who had the hospital down on the lake. Well, it wasn't really a hospital, it was more like a clinic, and that's where I live. 1898, actually. I grew up there. My dad sold it to me, as is. And it's held together by spackle and wallpaper, and, you know, for those of you who do it yourself, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, I'm not even going to get into that, but it is a nice spot on the lake that I was able to get from my folks, and I grew up there, so fond memories. My wife, Lindsay, and I have a 5-year-old, Vigo, boy, 5-year-old boy, who's at Lake Elmo here, and then Clara, who's 13. At Woodbury Middle School, actually. She's a big swimmer, so really proud of them. And we have a dog, Hazel, and a cat, Maggie, and they're pretty cool too. I practiced law for 20 years in Minneapolis, mostly complex business litigation, did a little bit of criminal defense work, white-collar criminal defense, but was mostly a civil litigator. And Pete Orput, many of you probably know Pete, remember Pete. We miss him dearly, love him very much. He recruited me to come to the county attorney's office, and then 2 years later he asked me to succeed him when he retired, and unfortunately he passed away suddenly, but here I am. And he didn't leave a instruction manual or anything, so I'm just trying not to burn the place down, you know. But there is something special about this office, and that's that Pete had phenomenal values. That's what, you know, attracted me to him. But everybody shared those values with him. And so as a result, you've kind of got the wheel, spoke, hub sort of thing, where, you know, Pete's values radiated out to all the people he hired, and then we all have those values in common, even though he's not here. And I've been hiring along those lines, trying to cultivate that same approach. So in the criminal division, we have, well, first of all, let me talk a little bit about, so there's 60 people in the office, 60 and a half. We got one person who's half-time right now. It's about half lawyers and half staff. On our criminal division, you know, first of all, just say a little bit about my philosophy, is that public safety is the number one thing I'm looking at. There's a lot of other competing interests. You know, diversion is important, rehabilitation is important, you know, deterrence, all these kind of things are important. But the thing I look at that I think is, for me, the single most important quality that we have is public safety. And I think, you know, there's some people who feel like, well, let me put it this way. I don't believe that our attempt to work with people to get on the right path, in which we should be doing, but I don't think the risk of that needs to be borne by their neighbors. So you know, we're really careful about that kind of thing, kind of rehabilitation, diversion kind of stuff, which is a big part of what we do, but I'm always looking at it through the lens of what keeps, you know, our community safe. So the criminal division prosecutes all felonies, and they do some gross misdemeanors and misdemeanors. As you know, the sheriff here, Dan and I are good friends. Anything that in his policing area, law enforcement area, comes to our office, but there are cities that have city attorneys and their own police force, and they'll handle those. And of course, misdemeanors and some gross misdemeanors go to your esteemed counsel here, right?
Not me.
No, you're not doing it? Okay.
We're doing prosecution.
Yeah, I wasn't sure who did it, but in any case, you know the deal. So we get about 1,500 referrals a year, and you know the vast majority of those in the high 90s, you know, come out as convictions. And often they're plea arrangements. That's just the way most cases go. But you know, we try the ones we have to try, and we feel like, you know, the victim's voice really needs to be heard. And sometimes there's cases that we're not entirely sure how it's going to go, but we believe we have enough evidence to take it to trial, and we believe that that's what we need to do because it's the right thing to do. And sometimes we have to do it because, you know, the victim needs to see that happen. So I was just going to show you a little bit about the complaint. You know, there's nothing that really stands out here. You can see it's higher through, you know, 2017, 18. It's, you know, the overall number of complaints wasn't really affected by COVID. You'll see some other stats that are. You know, I think when you start to see it drop a little bit, I like to think that's because the law enforcement is doing, you know, a really good job of deterring, and then, you know, there's less that come to us, but more that we end up charging. Let's talk a little bit about auto theft. Some of you people have heard about the, you know, the Kia Challenge it's called. Well, so this is one of these cars. It was stolen in St. Paul and recovered out here. You know, the gateway crime used to be smoking dope and shoplifting, and now it's joyriding. Someone steals a car, usually a kid. They get their friends in there who have no necessarily any interaction with real street crime. Pretty soon, you know, the people who steal the cars are using them to commit crimes, and the other kids get involved, and the next thing you know, they're driving the car and they're stealing their own car. And that's, you know, that's a pattern that we've seen. So auto thefts are something that we track, you know, pretty closely. And by auto theft, this means all the related. So sometimes we'll charge people with, you know, receiving stolen property because you can't necessarily prove which one, you know, actually stole the car, but they're in possession of a stolen car. And the penalties for theft and along these lines are the same, whether it's, you know, you get actual theft or it's receiving stolen property. Though you will see that when you get to the, and these are adults, these aren't juveniles, but when you start to look at the COVID effect, you can really see the bubble in 2000, you know, 93 and 21, and then it starts to drop a little bit in 2022. So we're back down, I think, to I mean, it's 47 is still too high, but I think we're back down to the kind of numbers we had before COVID. So this graph always gets me, and it just, I think, tells you a lot about our society, because the number of people who are willing to just run from the cops is incredible, and that tells you something about the mentality. Either they're just feeling really lucky, or they don't respect law enforcement, and they're not thinking about the consequences, or maybe they're thinking they can get away with it. And you will see that the numbers do kind of coincide with the COVID. You know, a lot of people people were in their houses and cars were getting stolen. But fleeing from police is it's a tough thing. I didn't get to see. Oh, come on. Let me do it this way.
There you go.
And that kind of stuff you saw the chart, I mean, that's happening too often, way too often, and that's not, that poses a serious danger. We see law enforcement being dragged, you know, by cars when they're taking off. They'll get the door partly open, and then the driver will put it into drive and just take off. And I've seen officers being dragged until they ran into a light post abutment. You know, I mean, it's just, like this is a serious issue, and I think we're seeing, particularly with juveniles, a much lower boiling temperature than maybe we used to see in the past. I'm not sure that people are really able to comprehend the consequences. They're just not thinking through what they're doing, or they don't seem to care about the consequences. And, you know, as Pete used to say, some people are just absolutely determined to do, you know, life in prison on the installment plan, and, you know, we're seeing some of those folks. Now, I think people have probably heard about the East Metro Human Trafficking Task Force. It's something that was started again by Pete. It is a very successful local sex trafficking task force. It has done, I think, a great job of keeping that element out of Washington County. It's one of those things where you're not going to know how successful it is until it's gone. And getting funding for it in this particular time is really difficult. Our grant was cut, you know, from the Department of Public Safety, and you know, we're still going strong. You know, our focus has been on I've tried to reorient us a little bit we still do the stings and the recovery, and they're really important, but the recovery and particularly runaway kids is where I think, you know, our effort is best spent. Because, you know, these kids, you say, you know, they get solicited within sex for the first 48 hours, and being a runaway or homeless is the number 2 contributor to being sex trafficked. And the number 1 is chemical dependency or mental health. And we have the tools, the technology, the skill to be able to investigate and prosecute those. There was a case in Cottage Grove. Here, let me run through the listing first. Okay, so these are just some of the people that have been prosecuted, who have been arrested as sex trafficking operatives in Washington County. I had to blur out the faces because I've been in a presentation where someone said that was my ex-husband, and that was not fun. But I mean, they're out there. I mean, this affects our community, and I think that story illustrates it. So this is one person. Now, this is taken from a publication. This is not local, and it's a little bit dated, but this is one individual, and the number of times that she was arrested and photographed. And it's just, I mean, to me, it's heartbreaking to see, you know, how this horrible crime can break someone and destroy them. Now, we don't do a lot of arresting and, I should say, particularly prosecuting of the victims of sex trafficking. You know, we're really trying to recover those that we can. And it's really difficult to get folks who have, you know, been victimized here to get out of the lifestyle. And when people ask, you know, what sort of thing can I do? You know, I think that it's the recovery part of this, it's where we need the most help. And that is, you know, there are some halfway houses that are just starting, a Corin's House or Corin's House in Oakdale, I think, that just started, where it's a nice environment for women, typically women. I think it's open to everybody, but, you know, typically women who come in there. There's some places in St. Paul and Minneapolis that are like homeless shelters that you can go, and it's a place to be out of the weather, but it's not a real home, and it's hard to get somebody when they're coming off of, you know, their addiction and they're going through all that to ask them to, you know, step out with all the willpower that it needs. And of course, then the sex trafficker is still is in their life, you know, even after we've arrested them and they're sitting in jail, what they're trying to do is reach out to that person to make sure that they don't testify and that they keep control over them. So I was going to talk about there was a girl from Cottage Grove whose grandmother reported her missing, and the law enforcement called our task force, and we were able to crack the phone right away, and through some location, through some search warrants that showed location, we were able to indicate that she was in a motel in Newport. And when law enforcement showed up there, she was sitting on the bed in lingerie, having been assaulted for 37 hours. You know, 14 years old. And, you know, it just gets worse. And so the fact that we were able to be that quick meant that at least we were able to get to this girl before this pattern happen. So juvenile crime is something everybody, pays a lot of attention to. We try to use the right size hammer for the right size nail, and that means we do a lot of diversion. There's a lot of kids that just, they do stupid things. It happens to be an offense. They go through, some programming, get some anger management, gets a little bit of help, and they complete diversion. We never see them again. And that's the vast majority of kids that we encounter. And that's good news. The bad news is that there's about 10 cases a year with people who have multiple crimes, rap sheets as long as your arm, going back to when they were 10, in Ramsey County, Hennepin County, all over the place. And this level of crimes they're committing are very serious. And those, we often end up petitioning and certifying them for, to be tried as an adult, or being put into what we call extended juvenile jurisdiction, which means they're held in a locked facility, for kids until they're 20. So looking again at motor vehicle thefts, you can see in COVID what happens when kids are not in school, and I know for my daughter was 9 at the time. It took 3 adults to get 1 kid to do remote learning, and she'd flop all over the floor and be like, I can't do it, and then grandma working on it, I'm working on it, mom's working on it, and it's tough, right? And so if you don't have that, if you don't have that kind of structure, if you don't have a teacher or a coach or, a counselor, somebody, a church leader, somebody that you're interacting with who has that kind of structure, if you don't have it at home, or at least a hint of it, you're really set up to fail in a lot of ways. And then taking a kid like that, giving them a $700 iPhone and just, nothing to do, bad things happen. And we're seeing an entire generation are going through the school system that are being affected by that. And you can see by the motor vehicle theft numbers that that's the case. So this is a jacked car that was stolen in Hennepin County and stopped here in Washington County. You will see, here, let me do this. You will see that's a gun in his hand. No, it doesn't show up there. It's a gun in his right hand, and he's running from law enforcement there. So we have not had a carjacking in 2023 or 2024. We're going in 2025. And we never did have a lot of numbers, but the fact that we haven't seen that kind of crime that's still really kind of limited to the bigger cities, tells you something about Washington County, something about law enforcement. We actually heard a jail call from someone telling his friends, don't come out here, these guys are really serious. And I want to put that on bulletin board when we come out in 94.
Yes.
So I'm just going to wrap up here real quick. The Civil Division does everything. It's the legal counsel of the county, but all your civil commitments, all your contract review, that sort of thing, tax appeals, that kind of stuff comes through the office. So, there's been a couple things that have happened in Lake Elmo, and I think you probably know about this. Is 36 in Lake Elmo Avenue, and crash. It's coming up right here. It's coming up. Here we go. It's a 5-year-old girl in the back of a Ford Focus that has stopped in the left lane and was rear-ended at full speed at 62 miles an hour by someone driving a Nissan. So her name is Morgan. And Jeffrey Alexander, 42, was going 62 miles an hour and rear-ended the Ford Focus. The girl died in the hospital not too long after this. He has been charged with 2 counts of vehicular homicide. He was .05 at the time of blood draw, so that's a few hours after the accident. And we don't have to watch this. And he was prescribed clonazepam, but the mix didn't help. So there's 1 count of recklessness and then 1 count of under the influence. And we just went through some of the pretrial motions, and he's looking at 8.5, 10 years under these counts. Well, I just tried to hit a few things. I know we're kind of limited on time. I didn't want to take up too much of your time, but I've been going around talking to some of the city councils. It's something that I feel really, it's important for our office to be out in the community, talking to people, and the work that you all do is really important. So I wanted to get this communication going. I think it's my second time here in this chamber. It's good to be back. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, or else we just move on with the agenda.
I don't have questions per se, but I do thank you for the work that you do. I hate the fact that I know the East Metro has that human trafficking workforce. I wish we didn't, because I wish we didn't have a need for it. But I also know it's had success, and that I appreciate that it exists, because it does matter. I don't have any specific questions for you, but I was actually very curious to know, so that they are being charged with CVH on that.
Yep. First and second, 2 counts.
Any other questions for Mr. Magnuson?
No questions here.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
I think that was very informative, and the folks who will be watching the meeting tonight, they've learned a little bit more about the county attorney's office. It's oftentimes, something on the ballot, and for vast majority of citizens, they never have an interaction.
Yeah, thank you. It's true. And, after COVID, everybody sort of hunkered down, trying to get, as nice as me, it's some of the other lawyers in the office are out doing involvement in the community, and it's just really important that we have that communication.
Well, and I would wager most residents, like, the county attorney's office is up here on this pillar. Like, it's a very established, informed, elite is not the right word, but they look up to this place of highly qualified people. Most people don't want to ever have an interaction with the county attorney's office, because if you do, maybe not a good thing, but it's also good to have conversations like these, so they know that you're a member of the community as well with the same priorities.
I
I
appreciate
think
it.
the other thing that's helpful is the statistics, because again, I wasn't aware of any of these statistics, and I think people seeing the activity and the change over time helps them, which a much better idea of the state of the county.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Magnuson. Hopefully that previous house is holding up well in the rain right now with being held up by gum and plaster. On the consent agenda for tonight, we have approved payments and disbursements, approved pay request number 7 for Stillwater Boulevard, CASA 14, trunk water main improvements. Approved pay request number 2 for the well number 2 PFAS removal equipment. Approved geotechnical services contract for the Village Parkway UPRR crossing improvements. And accept park bench donation 2025-041. That is the consent agenda. Absent of any motions to amend, all those in favor of approving the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. That brings us to the regular agenda, approving the ULI TAP for the 180 acres.
So we're trying to get the presentation set up. I clicked on it and then went to this.
I confirm my continuance. There you go.
Easy enough. Well, we have Meg Flanagan here from ULI to present the technical assistance panel. She's done this presentation a few times to the EDA, and at the last EDA meeting, they recommended going with a 2.5-day session for the 180-acre site. So she has a presentation here today, and we can answer any questions that you may have about the TAP.
Hi, thank you for having me back. It's nice to be here again. I always enjoy talking about the work we do at ULI Minnesota. ULI stands for Urban Land Institute, and we are a global nonprofit with a mission to shape the built environment for positive impact on communities worldwide. Oops. There you go. So we are a multidisciplinary membership organization. Worldwide, we have 48,000 plus members. Here locally, we have 550 in the state of Minnesota. And we do a lot of work, including research, sharing best practices, publishing reports and publications, organizing events. And then what I'm here to talk about today is our advisory services work, which happens as a technical assistance panel, which is when it's done locally, or an advisory services panel, which is when it's done out of our national office. So we're going to talk about a TAP here. And a technical assistance panel is essentially where a community comes to us with a land use challenge or a policy question, and we put together a panel of cross-sectoral experts who are willing to spend, a significant amount of time, both ahead of the TAP and during the TAP, really investigating that question in order to come up with recommendations that are neutral, that are market-based, and are actionable. So, and this happens through three key areas: engagement with the sponsor, which is the city or the other entity that brings us in, engagement with the community, which is part of our fact-finding, and then also the expert deliberative process. And so ULI Minnesota locally has conducted more than 20 TAPs over the past 15 years. And so we've had more than 120 of our members who have participated. And I will say globally, we do dozens. ULI globally does dozens of these every year. This is something that is really key to what we do as an organization, is this idea of giving back to the community by leveraging our members' expertise to make positive impact. And that's something that's really unique about ULI is, like many other professional organizations, we of course focus on professional education and professional development, and we focus on networking. But the TAPs are a really unique opportunity for our members to work together and to work with other really dedicated and passionate cross-sectoral professionals that they don't usually get to work with to really make an impact on our communities. And that's really meaningful to our members. So a little bit about what goes into a TAP is the first step is a sponsor will engage us, again, with a land use or a policy challenge. And then the ULI staff, which in this case is me, will recruit some chairs from our membership. And usually when I'm looking for a panel chair, and usually I like to do co-chairs, is I'll go to people who have done a TAP before. And because I don't want, I want my chairs to be people who are experienced, and I'll find people who have that right expertise. And then we form a steering committee, which includes the sponsor, the ULI staff, and the chairs. And occasionally we'll bring in other key stakeholders to be part of that steering committee. And we'll start, and the first step is to really finalize the 3 to 4 key questions for the panelists to consider. And that's really important, getting the right, what's the what and what's the why. So getting the questions right is an important first step. And then the sponsor's responsibility is to really work as part of the steering committee, provide the meeting facilities, and a lot of it's about providing the background information that our panel needs in order to be successful. So I'll work with the sponsor to put together what we call a briefing book, which is a wide variety of documents. And again, what that looks like depends on the scope of the TAP. But a lot of times, it'll include your comp plan, your zoning information, might include a housing study if it's a housing-focused question, might include some historical documents. Again, we have a whole long list of things that could go into a briefing book. And then what we do is we work to determine what's the best information for the panel to use. Another key part that we ask the sponsor to do is to really help us identify and connect with the key stakeholders that need to be part of the process that we're going to be interviewing and talking to. And then, of course, we want you to, review and comment on the draft report before we finalize it. The steering committee, as I mentioned, is made up of the sponsor, the ULI staff, the chairs, and other key people. And their job is really to identify the scope of work and the questions, to vet the potential panelists, making sure we have the right diverse range of perspectives and expertise, to provide recommendations on the materials for the briefing book, to help with the recommendations for stakeholders, planning and logistics, and then, of course, being part of the presentation. And our chairs have, key part is getting the right chairs in place because they have a lot of work to do. Their job is really to lead the whole process, to help make sure we have the right people in place to keep the TAP on track, to keep our panelists from, going down rabbit holes and keeping things moving, and then really being key parts of creating the TAP report and leading the presentations. And then, of course, our panelists, we ask them, they have to be fully committed to the process, to the panel, so to read all their briefing materials, come with questions, be really active. We say don't take meetings in the middle of a TAP report or TAP panel. We really want you there in the room being part of it, to participate in the deliberations, to help with recommendations. It's really fun. Always love having the architects. We always have architects or landscape architects because they just sit down and whip out drawings, which is really incredible to see that talent and work. They also, again, are part of putting together the report and also making presentations as the chair requests. So, and then for, the staff responsibility, it's mostly logistics things and also generally supporting the members and the steering committee. So a process really, again, the panel will review the briefing materials in advance. And once we're starting the TAP, we always like to start with a tour of the site. It's really important to see it on the ground because you see things better when you're on your feet than in a car driving by. And you can start seeing their minds get to work when we're walking. TAP I did a couple weeks ago, I had people climbing down into ditches and looking at water pipes and seeing where water was coming out. So it was really fun to watch them do that. Then we usually do a reception to kick things off, and that's a really nice opportunity to have informal conversations with potential stakeholders where they're not feeling like they're being interviewed, but it's more a chance like, what does this mean to you? Or we always like to ask, what do you like best about your community? Or what do you think is really special and unique about the place where you live? And what would you like to see emphasized? We do ask the sponsor to do a formal presentation to the panel. We do stakeholder interviews. So again, trying to interview as many people as possible. The panel deliberates, makes recommendations, and then we do a presentation and written report. And so I want to just share, just to kind of show a little bit about what goes into a TAP. This is an example from a TAP we did last year in Little Canada, just to kind of give you a sense. Again, every TAP is different. I want to be very clear, right? Every TAP is different, every panel is different. The questions, that we're going to answer, what the slides are going to look like will be different, but this does show the process. And so the first question thing we always do as a panel, once we've gotten through the background and the briefings and the interviews, is to establish guiding principles. And that's really important. Those guiding principles are what's going to inform the work going forward. So in this case, these were the guiding principles that the panel put together for that TAP we did last year. One of the questions that came up is, on this TAP was questions about housing, market rate versus affordable housing. And this is one of our panelists who's a real estate developer. He sat down and whipped up these numbers to basically say, look, the only kind of housing that's going to be able to work financially would be affordable housing, because in this area where the median income is, where median rents are, that's what you're going to be looking at. So it was really interesting just to see him dig into his expertise and just lay the numbers out. And he noted here that townhomes and income-restricted units funded by bonds were really the most viable options. We also love to do illustrative images. So let's say, our panelists might have seen something, at another location that they think could be an example or a guidepost for the area we're studying. So in this case, we were looking at an empty lot downtown Little Canada, and one of the ideas was to do pop-up activations in order to test out some concepts, looking ahead to long-term use. And so the panelists found some illustrative images from other areas that were very similar, just to show what could be. And then this is another location where we were looking at an area where they wanted to suggest adding outdoor seating. So they used the example of Texatonka, just to show, again, what can happen and what are some ideas. And then as I mentioned, we also love to get those architects working on drawings. So here they did just some really, and this was done in an afternoon where they really sat down and said, these are a couple options for using this space. The bottom row is they were presenting two different concepts for the same location. So one is a townhome community and the other is an incubator space with some green space. So again, it's just important. The visualization is really helpful. And then, of course, we like to share our key takeaways. So again, this is a key takeaway for the lot at 2828 Rice Street, where we basically recommended that the city hold that lot for now, wait for the Rice Street to be reconstructed, and then in the meantime, maybe try to get into a use agreement with the next door building. And then after 5 to 10 years, look to sell and try to get higher and better use of the liquor store site. So, and we noted that the future development for that area is likely going to be focused on commercial. And then here's another one of the priorities from that TAP was prioritizing placemaking and walkability and some recommendations on a design workbook. And then we also gave them some actionable next steps. So again, this is, that's not to say that, a TAP for your TAP would look the same, recommendations, same, every TAP's different, but we would definitely be giving you the guiding principles. We would be giving some site concepts. We would be giving next steps and, and getting a lot more in depth, especially when we get to the written report. So the investment for a TAP starts at $17,500. That's the shorter end, I believe. So the EDA has recommended the longer version, the 2.5 day, which is $35,000. And again, it's your investment varies by the length of the TAP as well as the number of panelists and the size of the deliverable. So the 2.5 day TAP will have more panelists, and we do have an option to bring in up to 2 panelists from outside the Minneapolis area. So if there's a certain expertise we really want to tap into that we don't have locally, it's a great chance to tap into ULI's national network and find those experts who are really going to bring the value. And then, so so the EDA has proposed the 2.5 day, which as I mentioned is $35,000. That would get us the larger panel up to 2 outside panelists. Your report is going to be longer, probably about 40 pages, including all the appendixes, a little more in-depth. And it's just, again, a really in-depth chance we'll be able to talk to more stakeholders and really dig deeper into the question. Any questions?
Thank you for that. I don't remember if we asked it during the EDA meeting, but as an example, you had mentioned sometimes it could be 4 days or 5 days. What would be some of those, obviously it wasn't recommended in this case, but what would be a project that's in that 4 or 5 day realm?
Yep, so a lot of times that's if we're looking at multiple sites. So for example, we did one, and this was before, I've been with ULI almost 2 years. So before I was with ULI, they did a project for MnDOT that really involved looking at the ABC ramps and some of the other areas around, and that was a longer term. There was also there was a project done in the Rondo neighborhood back, again, in the late 2010s that was actually done it was an advisory services panel done out of ULI National, and that was a 5-day process.
Thank you.
Yeah, on page 2, you talk about why host a TAP, and one of the third bullet, city may find it easier to secure regulatory approvals and to attract capital, as we'll have the TAP report as reference. Maybe you just talk to that a little bit, and I guess maybe just kind of evolve those as far as it seems like those are, you're saying some of like the key values that come out of it.
Yeah, well, I think, part of it is just having a document in your library to bolster some of the questions that might be asked, when you're applying for grants or other fundings or regulatory approval, to say you've had this neutral third party come in and make these recommendations. Specific, again, going to the Rondo example, the Reconnect Rondo movement actually came out of that ASP that happened with ULI, and that was actually part of there were 3 projects that went into that series. There was a Building Healthy Places TAP initiative, so really looking at our community structure. Second part of that was looking at the feasibility of a land bridge, and the third was actually a follow-up during COVID that was done via Zoom on the 4P model. So again, but for Reconnect Rondo to have that document when they've been talking to the State House and to the federal funders as a backup document's been really helpful for them when they've been getting their funding. Minneapolis Warehouse District, we just did a TAP there about 1.5 years ago. And as a result of that TAP, one of the things that did go through is that the city has they've changed some of their processes for residential conversions, to streamline the process to make it more affordable for developers.
Okay, and then could you maybe talk a little bit as well? So obviously the 2.5 day was the proposed, option. What would be missed if we went with the one-day option? What would
Yeah.
be missing out on? What's the benefit of going with the 2.5 from your perspective?
That's a great question. I think one thing is missing out on the opportunity for national expertise. Not to say we don't have great members here in Minnesota who bring phenomenal, backgrounds and expertise, but there is something nice about being able to tap into someone, maybe in a city that's undergone some similar challenges to get that expertise. I think the other thing is we get to talk to more stakeholders when it's a longer tap because, and it gives us an extra day. So part of that extra day is getting more conversations and being able to get more insight from people. And it also lets us give our initial recommendations are more finely honed. As you can imagine, trying to put together a whole presentation in one day, it's a little, we do great work, but there's always some cleanup and some polishing that has to happen. We can be a little more polished with that extra time.
Okay. Is there oftentimes follow-up? I mean, even 2.5 days is a very short time for
Yeah.
this. Is there follow-up after? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so this, obviously we don't get the report written in 2.5 days. The
Okay, I was
bigger
saying,
part-
you guys aren't even human.
I know. No, we do usually, what we do at
Impressive.
the end of the second, of the full day is we are able to do a presentation right away.
Got
In
it.
some cases, that can be a full public presentation, to anyone who's interested. It could be a closed presentation to council members, or it could even be just to staff, and we'll come back, to a regular council meeting. So that's very flexible. But what we do need to go back afterwards, it takes us a couple months to get the report finalized. I try to get the first draft done within a month, and then there's always, the first draft goes to the chairs for review. Second draft goes to the sponsor as well as the full panel. So there's still work. And obviously, there could even be some, the architects are still gonna draw afterwards. They're gonna clean up their sketches a little bit, make them a little nicer. The guys crunching numbers, I shouldn't say guys, because, women crunch numbers too, but the people crunching numbers will, might refine them a little more and say, okay, I'm gonna clean up this proposed pro forma and get a couple more specific numbers in there. So there's still, I don't, leave the day and be done. We still have work to do. And then often there's questions about presenting to community groups, presenting to other organizations who might have an interest in hearing from it, keeping the dialogue going. And then another thing we like to do is check in. So we'll check in with the sponsor, pretty regularly afterwards, 6 months, 12 months, ongoing, and say, how'd that work for you? Are you using any of the recommendations? In fact, we even did, about a year ago, we did a breakfast program for ULI members and friends where we put together a panel of people who either worked on TAPs or had been part of a city that sponsored the TAP, just to, again, do that. What was it like to work on this for the panelists? What were your aha moments? And then for the sponsors, it was like, okay, what have you done with this? And it was really interesting to hear, Golden Valley, where we did, again, this was well before my time, 2016 did a study of their downtown that they really did point to having been a catalyst to get some really real development done there. And then there was another city who I won't mention, but the staff member said, yeah, we took that to council, and they weren't interested. And we took that to council. So, people.
Why do you think that? I mean, 'cause
Yeah.
that'd be my next question is
That's-
when
yeah.
it doesn't go well, like, that would be,
Yeah, it's-
probably the worst case
No,
scenario.
exactly.
Is what happens there? How did that go wrong, do you think?
Well, I think, and that was a case where it was a policy-focused TAP. So, and it was also being run out of ULI's national organization. So from the Terwilliger Housing Center. So I think it was, might not have been as actionable as some of the ones that I've done in the last couple of years, where where we really are getting into next steps. This was more policy based, so I think it was probably not as tangible. And it also could be that just, the current council had different thoughts. I also we did one, again, before I started with the ULI, there was a TAP for the Kmart site in Minneapolis. And that one, I know that the staff member working on that site said, yes, I consult this, on a weekly basis. So that was nice to hear it wasn't on a step. I will say the Warehouse District TAP, one of my panelists was, holds a position in Philadelphia called the Night Mayor. Other cities call this position the director of the nighttime economy or something similar. And one of his recommendations was that Minneapolis needed a night mayor. Mayor Fry did not like that idea because he is the mayor day and night.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, I will, I can't guarantee that you're gonna like every recommendation that our panel comes up with. I mean, that's part of
Yeah.
the process. What I can say is that our members are some of the smartest minds in land use and the built environment out there. And the fact that our membership is cross-sectoral. So, any panel I put together is going to have developers, it's going to have architects, designers, might have a finance person, might have a placemaker, might have a planner, again, looking at the needs. And these are some of the smartest minds. I'm not gonna put anyone on a panel who is currently or looking to propose a project in the community we're serving. It's really important. The integrity of that panel is really, really important to us. So I want to absolutely make sure that it's a neutral, it's, best practice, it is market-based, and that we're giving you the best expertise that our members can give.
And how are you ensuring there's no conflict of interest with those panel members?
Yeah, well, we ask them to sign a form, so essentially,
Got it.
we'll ask them, do you have a project, or are you, I guess they, I've never had issues with someone not being honest
Sure.
on that. But no, that's really important, because we want you to trust that they're coming in it with truly that
Yeah.
neutral perspective.
Okay.
One thing I would want to add, just so you know, we've been talking to the county CDA, and there is a grant for this project that covers 50%. So we've already started on that application.
So where would the other 50% come from? What budget?
Was that, this would come from, it's in the community development budget.
Okay, so we have funds available in the community development budget. That was my only question, because I think it's a really great idea, having read through it and studied it before I came here this evening.
You have more.
Yes, so, and maybe this will be a little bit more for discussion too. I feel like last time that the council kind of talked about this and at the goal planning meeting, maybe even last time we brought this up and we were trying to sell the property, I thought we were more under the impression that the city wasn't necessarily developing, and I don't think that that's what this is saying, that the city's planning to develop it. So if that is kind of still the route we're going, which maybe it's not, but if we're looking more for a developer to purchase the land and they make those decisions, I think I'm kind of hearing how this could be helpful for that situation of maybe it helps us bring a developer in, and that's kind of the return on investment of us, spending $35,000. It's gonna hopefully get us a buyer more efficiently. Am I thinking of that right? Or
Yeah,
maybe how do you see
Absolutely, and
the
knowing,
TAP helping that situation?
yeah, and if we're hearing that as your goal, right, is to find that developer, I think that can be part of the questions, is how do you set the space for the best possible developer experience and return for the city? And I think part of that is, really getting clear on what your goals are for the space. Not saying that we're gonna develop it with this many houses or this many, offices, but more like what, highest and best use, sorry, I keep hitting the mic. What do you,
does, yeah.
I talk with my hands. What are your goal, this is your chance to really think about your vision for that site and how you want it to, is it a catalyst for other development? Is it a chance to do something, I think that came up when I was at the EDA last week. This is kind of a one chance thing, right? And you really want to put the work into getting a good place for it. I will say one recommendation that I thought was great that came out of a recent TAP, the one in Little Canada was one of the sites. They said, start working on the stormwater. You get your stormwater system in place so that when you have a developer looking at it, that's done, and that's going to be really compelling to that developer that that's something they don't have to worry about. So they can even give you kind of those actionable items that you can do to set the stage for a developer to come in.
And Jason, maybe you could comment that too a little bit, how you see this playing into that process as far, and again, maybe some of those conversations with the EDA has kind of shifted where we were previously, and obviously the last one didn't work out, so maybe
Yeah,
that led to some of this too.
But we have a list of questions too, so some of it is like, what's the highest and best use for this site? I know that it's mostly business, like a business park zoning, so looking at that, looking at what's most financially feasible, how are the current market conditions gonna affect this? Like, is this the right time to go out to the market? Should we do an RFP? Should we just actively work with a broker? Should we subdivide the site or try to sell it in phases? What does a phasing plan look like?
And these are questions that you'd want to be asking the panelists.
That's
what
something
you're
we've
saying.
already sent, and we're gonna build
Got it.
more, and
Okay.
people that are involved, including the council, would also kind of flesh that out, so.
So it sounds like it's a lot of like, how do we make this as appealing as possible to a developer to purchase?
Now, like in the next year or so, right? So that's kind of what we've been tasked with, is trying to get this sold basically in 2026, right? So,
Okay.
I think the other thing that this enables you to do, once you have some ideas, what's the highest and best use, what's possible on the site, is to actively pursue a developer. You know, that's probably foreign here in the metro area, but in the, outside the metro area, when you're a city trying to attract a development, you actually actively go out and meet with developers and potential businesses and try and tell them, we have a site for you, and this site works for this reason. And you convince them to come in and look at it and try and, you know, encourage them to develop in your community. And I think that by having this panel and getting some ideas like that, you know, if we could either actively pursue it, or someone comes in and says, I'm looking for a site, we say, we have just a perfect site for you, we've already considered these things, and it makes it much more attractive and better. And, you know, I think Jason would just, you know, love to fly to New York and meet with developers, and, you know, we could get a competition for the Trump Tower on this site.
Do you have a question?
No.
Are there additional questions at this time for either perspective at this point? Otherwise, I will fully entertain a motion.
Okay, one more question for Jason. Going through the conversations with the 1 day versus the 2.5 day, from the staff perspective, being able to get your questions answered, because I think that's gonna be a heavy portion of this. Does staff have thoughts, you know, when you've talked to the staff and yourself, like, as far as, I mean, it is double the price. If we think we can get what we need in that 1 day, I'd prefer to do that, but if we're not gonna get the information in that 1 day, you know. I
we
don't want-
recommended the 2.5 day, just because the site's so large and it's such an important site for the city, that the cost, you know, the budget's there, we can proceed with it. I think it's the right approach for us.
Okay, cool, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Motion to approve the 2.5 day proposal from ULI for a tap for the city-owned 180 acres.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve with the 2.5 day. Any discussion?
I just, the comment that Councilmember Dragisich had about the seeking out developer actively, that is interesting, because, yeah, I suppose that really hasn't been something that we've had to do. It's been more the opposite, where we feel like we almost have to sometimes interview, you're not interviewing, but like kind of
Yep.
siphon through what's a good developer, who's the right developer for this city. And I think, you know, talking through this is helpful. I think having the information that those questions that Jason was talking about, if we don't have the answers to those, who do we seek out, right? Now give us some guidance on it, so I think that will be really helpful. Again, you know, I don't know if the process or kind of the thought process on it has changed. If we're planning to be a little bit more active as a city in the development versus not, it still sounds like a little bit more so like we don't want to be involved. We just really want to make sure we're setting it up in an appropriate way for the developers, the right developers to come in. And if that's the way we're going with this, that's the way I'd prefer to go versus the other route where the city's doing more of the developing. I think leave it to a developer who's the expert, and let's use this process to get those answers that Jason was talking about.
I think, you know, we have a chance and a unique and interesting opportunity here. And I want to thank Jason for bringing this, you know, to the forefront, because, you know, my conversations with you outside the council, you have an understanding and a desire to, you know, be involved in good development for the city. And good development means the right site and the right type of development that when we need, that we make a return on investment for the private sector, so they want to come here. And I want to thank you for looking at this effort and carrying through all the things that we've talked about. Very good step forward, and it's a sign, good sign of your leadership in this area.
Thank you.
And I would echo that as well. And I agree with Councilmember Hurd's comments. This 180 acres is not something that many cities have a chance to, and I won't even say development, utilize, to be able to set forth and say what is the outcome that we want to see. What is the pacing? We've already had the discussion, and the previous council we did as well, for land use, and it didn't work, and it didn't work twice. And there's a reason it didn't work, and so we're going down a different route. So I appreciate that as a council, we had this as one of our 2-year priorities, and that staff has gotten us to this point to have these discussions with ULI, which I have full confidence with 2.5 days that, well, I expect that the product will be something that meets our needs and is something that aligns with the history of the products that you have produced before. I guess the thing for me is these 180 acres are a result of a lawsuit that's from 3M because our water will be polluted for centuries to come. And so to me, this is not all that different from the 70 acres for the sports site in that this is a site which we have an opportunity to do right, and we need to do it right the first time. We're not gonna be in the business of redeveloping things over and over again. I wanna do this right the first time on behalf of the city and our residents. And we've previously said, tax base expanded. There's a chance that we might be on the hook for some of our pollution costs. So to me, this is a win-win for the city and our residents, and I wanna see this get done right. The 2.5 day is, to me, the next step. And with that, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion for 2.5 days, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank
We are
you.
good to go.
And thank you. I look forward to working with you. And thank you for the comment. I think that's really important to note where that came from. I will say, the Amara of Amara's Law, I used to sing in church choir with her. So
Yep.
it's, that's also, yeah,
I've met with her family many times, and the issue hits home for
it
us.
does, yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for knowing her.
Yeah, well, her mom's my priest, so.
Have a good one. That brings us to accept bids and award contract for the Stillwater Area School District Utility Improvements Resolution 2025-040. Mr. Stanley.
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, yep, that's,
Apologies for,
that's okay. Close that one.
My computer says it's 78 and sunny. Like, that just means.
Is your computer still in Texas?
And then here it says 44, St. Paul.
A lot of defaults like Washington DC.
Is that what it is?
I don't know, it might be.
But it shows the right one here, the wrong one down here. And it's showing location, right? Trying to take me.
okay.
Shoreview to Roseville, where am I going?
That's fine.
Because they were talking about Little Canada. I heard him talking. They were
I have a
talking.
question. How many staff members does it take to get a PowerPoint up?
Yes. Oh, there we go. I just had to look at it long enough.
It looks right on this screen.
You know,
And then while
Pull it
that's
up on the screen.
happening, Mr. Stopa, timeline-wise, then next steps, how far out are we looking for that?
Usually it takes her about 90 days. She's gonna start assembling the panel. But we should hear from her in the next couple weeks in terms of questions and
Right.
kind of framing it up and who wants to be involved on our side.
So 90 days to that phase, and then potentially another month or two for that planning, I presume, before the actual Super Bowl?
Right, I mean, I believe she said like August, September is when it's gonna start. So fall would be when it starts.
Jason, the only flaw I saw in the presentation was, we talked about architects, we didn't talk about engineers on the panel.
I know. It's dangerous. Leave them out.
We didn't talk about lawyers either.
They belong in jail.
to all members of the public. That is Mr. Dragisich.
Thank you for your endorsement. Maybe we can get by without the PowerPoint.
Got it up on here. Just all huddled together. Right here. No, it doesn't anymore.
You know, they say,
They heard us talking.
bustle of attorneys that went off the bridge into the ocean. It must be. Especially when the mayor's here too. We got everyone on number 3 of
You've
us.
got too many of them, that's why they don't have any on the panel. See, it's not working. Doesn't matter, it is.
Cause I'm getting the same thing where. Oh, we are good to go.
The fourth time.
Mr. Stanley.
Okay, what an intro. Well, thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. Here I have an item to discuss the Stillwater Area School District utility improvements. Recommending awarding a construction contract tonight, but I'll have a little recap of the project. This project is the extension of municipal utilities to Oakland Junior High School, and then down to the new elementary school site, and then eventually a force main that discharges to a gravity line at Fifth Street. So there's been a number of actions here. This is an assessable project. The school district will be paying the lion's share of that assessment with one private property, but you can see tonight, May 20th, we are at the accept bids and award contract stage. So this map is kind of maybe a little hard to read, so I'll just maybe kind of step through. And there's a lot of colors up there, so you can see where Oakland Middle School is there on the right side of the screen. We're extending a water main and gravity sanitary sewer to the site that will tie in with the Royal Oaks development. The gravity sewer actually connects to the existing lift station. A new force main will be extended from that lift station down to Lake Elmo Avenue and 10th Street, where it will then connect with a new force main coming out of the new elementary school, and we'll be extending a new force main to the south, to the eventual discharge point. There's an existing 6-inch sanitary force main that extends from the Royal Oaks, or the Royal Golf lift station to an existing force main that runs down Lake Elmo Avenue right now. That force main will be disconnected and abandoned in place. And I've just kind of told you everything that I've got on this one right here, so. Just to recap some of the assessment information, the assessment was based on the the rec units. So there was a SAC determination done by Met Council earlier. There is one private property that does benefit from the project. House that fronts 10th Street North, 11817 10th Street North to be exact with the address. You can see the way the assessment's broken up here. Lake Elmo Elementary School and Oakland Middle School are paying very, very close to the amount, as they have the same number of sanitary erects for the most part. The water main from the elementary school is actually connecting to an existing water main in Lake Elmo Avenue. So that's where that's why that assessment reads 0 right now. And the new water main that will serve Oakland is what's being assessed there. In addition to the assessment, there are connection charges, SAC and WAC. So those fees are listed here. I'm not going to go through any of those in detail, but these are in addition to the assessment. So we received 7 bids last month, April 29th. GM Contracting is the low responsible bidder at just a little over $1 million. The estimated project cost, so that includes engineering and administration, is about $1.46 million, and that's down from what $1.75 million that was initially estimated in the feasibility report. Final assessments will actually be based on final costs, so that calculation will come back this fall. So again, tonight, I'm asking council to accept bids and award a contract for $1,044,814 for the Stillwater Area School District utility improvements, and also recommending that council authorize the city administrator to enter into a material testing contract for the project in a not-to-exceed amount of $30,000.
Questions for Mr. Stanley?
And I can jump back to any slides if anybody wants to.
So as this moves forward, I'm trying to be cognizant on my end, 'cause it's the district's paying for it. We obviously did our part to help with the designs, but they're paying for it. It's on a county road for the most part. There's one private property. As it moves forward, what are some of the steps that, on our end, that we are still responsible for as it moves along versus the things that we are not responsible for to make sure that the project is done on time for their needs? Because I know there's a distinct line, but what are the things that are on our end, but what are the things that are not our responsibility?
Sure, I'm gonna jump back to this slide that's a little hard to read. But you'll notice I'm gonna start with Oakland, again on the right side of the screen. You'll notice that there's a note that shows an extension into the middle school property of utilities. So we're providing service stubs to the property line. So, and we've specified a date of, I think we have a substantial completion date near the end of September to have this ready. So it's the school's responsibility to hook to that once it's available for them, okay? Similarly, if you look at the other side of the page, again, it's not a perfect picture here, but the elementary school is responsible for constructing their private lift station and their extension that will connect to the 10-inch force main that we'll be constructing down Lake Elmo Avenue. Now, we'll be coordinating with them, and I mean, we've been coordinating with the district, obviously, council knows that, for quite some time now. And so, as part of the construction administration, that will continue, and will be whether it's a connection or timing some sort of road closure, we'll be working very closely with the district to make sure everything gets constructed in a timely and tidy manner.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I don't see any new pumps for the lift station, so the existing pumps will have capacity to serve the current Royal Golf Club development and this load?
Councilman Drake says yes. Yeah, the current pumps are going to be able to function to serve everything that's shown here, yeah.
Seeing no further questions, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve resolution number 2025-040, accepting bids and awarding a contract to GM Contracting, Inc. for the bid amount of $1,044,814 for Stillwater Area School District utility improvements.
Second.
There's a motion, there's been a second. Any discussion? Well, thank you for the work on this. While it's not our project inherently, it does impact our residents, so. It impacts a large portion, not all, but a large portion, so. And I appreciate the answer you provided for my question, and I assume everything will continue to have those conversations. They're ongoing. They'll be documented to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely, thank you.
Calling the question, all those in favor of the motion for 2025-040, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Motion to authorize the city administrator to enter into a material testing contract for the project construction phase services and the not to exceed amount of $30,000 for the Stillwater area school district utility improvements.
Support.
There's been,
Second and third.
there's been a motion and a second from Councilmember Craignis. The previous motion passed. There's a second for this motion. Any discussion? I presume not. Calling the question. All those in favor of the second motion for the material testing contract, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that motion passes. And that brings us to item number 8.5, Parks Commission discussion. So we had two residents interview tonight for the one open Parks Commission spot. Ms. Peterson and Mr. Bloyer. Thoughts? And how long is this term open for?
I am not sure.
I believe this was the remainder of Mr. Elam's, so it's definitely not for a full 4, but it's the remainder of what he had. Thoughts?
Was he leaving early?
Mr. Elam left early because kids' sports are
Got it.
insane,
Okay.
and I can attest to that.
Yes, yeah, I hear you. Well, I think they're both great candidates, and if they're watching, both really appreciative of anybody who wants to volunteer their time to do this, so, I think both could be great candidates. I think just with Tracy's experience on that Park Advisory Commission, I think that's something that speaks a lot. She's already done some work there, she has she's gone through that process of seeing the parks plan. I think that's a pretty valuable asset. That's a long document, and even if you read it, sometimes you just might not know all that's went into it. So I think that fact really is kind of the deciding factor for me is from the Parks Advisory Commission board that she was on. I'd hope that Giovanni would, if he doesn't get the role here, that would continue to stay involved and provide his feedback, and, when the role opens up in the future, again, throw his name in the hat. But I think from hearing from them and the experience that Tracy has, that's kind of more the direction I would prefer to go.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Tracy has some really great experience, and I concur that, Giovanni, great candidate. I think that just needs more experience and time working with the community, but I think it's pretty invaluable what Tracy brings to the table.
I would concur with comments of my fellow council members. Giovanni was an impressive young man. His energy and his vigor and his willingness to serve, were really impressive to me. But Tracy has a little bit stronger background in park and recreation at this point. It's too bad we don't have two openings, because I think they
Yeah.
both make excellent members.
It is unfortunate. I think especially his being with a little bit of the younger generation, having that input, I think is so valuable. I think they're heavy users of the parks, and I think a lot of times as we're building the parks, that's who we're thinking about as well. So, it is tough. I think he'd be great at it, and hopefully, if it doesn't go that way, hopefully he would still be willing to share his input at meetings and, be heard as a resident as well.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion to appoint Tracy Peterson for the 4-year, 2-year? 2-year?
The remainder.
The remainder.
The open position.
Yeah, for the open Parks Commission position.
Second.
There has been a motion by Councilmember Hearn, a second by Councilmember Craigness. And I guess I didn't say anything on the, during that initial
Yeah,
discussion.
sorry.
But, well, and
Went out of order there.
no, it's all good. I would just say to Mr. Bloyer that the fact that you are obviously far younger than any of us, and you're willing to offer your time and your services for the city says a lot. And do not take this to be a negative or a pushback to stop you. Spots will open again. It happens for various reasons. There's also a planning commission spot open. But, yeah, you will find opportunities to serve when you are so willing. So
Yeah.
please continue that. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just want to add to that too, like, if, it is unfortunate that there was only one spot, because if there had not been, I would not have hesitated to appoint him as well.
Calling the question, all those in favor of Ms. Peterson for the open Parks Commission spot, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, and staff will connect with Ms. Peterson to let her know. I look forward to her service for the city. I and others. Council reports.
Just one, at our workshop last week, at the end, I talked a little bit about having on a future agenda for a workshop discussion of our stormwater fees and our credits. And I didn't see that on the future agenda items, and it was just last week, so I just want to remind the staff that we try and get that on one of them, so that we can get going on that before budget time and see what we need to do.
I can answer that. I did reach out to our finance director, but she's out of the country.
Yes.
But she's got it on her radar, and she's gonna schedule it for later this year. So we're waiting for her to get back.
Yeah, I knew she was on board
Yeah.
because I'd had some discussion with
Yeah.
her about it.
Yep,
But I just didn't see it, so I thought I would just give a reminder, and please,
Yeah.
I said, it's only been a week, so it's not a criticism, it was just in my mind,
we got it. It's coming.
that's all.
I look forward to Mayor Cadenhead returning to Lake Elmo.
You did a great job.
Oh, thank you. I look forward to him returning to Lake Elmo.
I do too.
No report.
No report. Ms. Miller,
No report.
Mr. Stopa.
So we received the phase one back for the fire station, and Stantec is recommending to do a phase two, which the county is paying for. We discussed with their consultants and also with Sarah about moving forward, and they feel like the right approach is to just move forward with the RFP. So we're looking at a June release date, and we're just working on the timeline. So the fire station, that site will be opening soon. I know people have been asking about it. And then what will happen from that point, since it's been discussed with the environmental, is depending on what comes back, we would select whoever to go forward with the project. And if there is any cleanup, we would work with the county on a response action plan that would be with that applicant and the city and the county working together on a cleanup if necessary. But as of now, we need the phase two to determine if the site actually needs to be cleaned up.
So there hypothetically, depending upon the time frame, there might not be results from the phase two by the time the RFP is done?
It will line up very closely,
Okay. But they will be aware that a phase two is occurring?
yes.
Okay. And with a phase two, I'm sure our engineers can answer this too, is it just phase two, or is it specific for this aspect?
Yeah, they're sampling for PFAS, asbestos. There's a groundwater plume, so they'll probably be taking samples of the soil samples, so.
Is the TCE concerned as well?
I would have to look at the report again.
All right,
Yeah, I can share the report with you.
all good. Mr. Stanley,
No report.
Ms. Sensala,
No report.
and with that, I am adjourning the meeting at 8:27. Thank you all.